Haters. Oh,
Welcome to Gumption. We're talking about bones today.
Bones.
Bones the
Bones the
TV
TV
show, not like
show.
Bones the body part. So who
And
wants
why
to
we're
talk
talking?
about bones?
I'll start.
I, okay. All right. You start, Kelly.
I have to go, so I'll start. I have to go for 1 second to go get my granddaughter in her little carrier. But what I liked about Bones was that they're fairly authentic with autistic people on the autism spectrum because the character, is supposed to be on the spectrum, very high functioning on the spectrum, but kind of fixated, not the best social skills. And because she's also very highly verbal, she'll talk about, yes, I don't really understand why people, cry because I told them that their dress was ugly or whatever. Not that she would tell them that their dress was ugly, but I like that about the show because they, occasionally they do take reality and twist it a little bit for fiction to make it work. But generally, I think they're quite authentic, and I like that. Do you guys notice that at all? Or do you
Mm.
think she's just Bones?
No, I don't
No,
notice it at
I
all.
I notice it because she's very socially clueless, but that's why she's got is it Angela, I think.
But
Angela is highly emotive and highly in tune with her
right.
feelings, and she's there to kind of be the foil to
But I know
Bones's
so
kind of.
many people who are like Bones, but are not autistic or on the spectrum that they know of.
That
So
they
it doesn't occur to me that she would be. I mean, once you say it, it makes sense, but it didn't occur to me.
No, a lot of times it's that they know it, especially for women. You don't really get diagnosed, especially if you're highly verbal and you're really smart and you're good at following directions and everything. So it's just kind of a recent thing that people have started to notice. And generally, what happens is if you're like, oh, I wonder if I'm on the spectrum, and you look it up, you find out, oh yeah, but there's not that much to do about it. You just understand why you are, and maybe you like Bones does in the show, is you have other people tell you what the right response is
Mm,
sometimes if you're not sure.
yeah,
I mean, because when
and
she first started going to interviews and interviewing people, um, what's his name? Seeley Booth would sometimes have to like leap out of his chair to take her away because she would be like talking to somebody who just, who was worried about a lost child or a lost family member, and she'd be like, well, uh, do you really think it was wise to do this? And he'd be like having to pull
mm,
her away. But she has evolved.
mm. And that's the thing. She's learned. She's it's a learned thing. She knows and understands certain things now that she didn't know before. I guess I don't know. I
Yes,
don't know
like
if that is that considered. Would you say that's in line with the someone on the autistic spectrum that they would
they're very
know and
capable of
understand?
learning. Yes, they just don't learn by watching. They kind of need to have it spelled out for them.
Mm, yeah,
I think it's
that's
kind of
fascinating.
all right. I have to go put Mia in her carrier. I'll be right back.
Okay, I
So
just think
who's your?
it's.
You think it's what?
I was gonna say it's really fascinating that idea of like a lead character being sort of on the autistic spectrum like that. I've never read the books, and it's never stated specifically on the show that I'm aware of that she is
Yeah.
on the autistic spectrum. She's just this person who doesn't necessarily understand all of the social cues that are going on around her, which I guess is a giveaway that she might be. Um, but it's just there must be people out there like her, I guess. I wonder if Kelly Reichs considers herself because isn't she's the one who wrote it and it's based on her own experiences. Do you
Yeah.
know?
I don't know. I know my sister. My sister has read the books, and my sister is studying basically the same. She's in that field, um,
Mm.
which is awesome. Um, so
Yeah.
she knows a whole than I do, but I didn't think to ask her about it.
Okay.
But my sister and Bones have a lot in common. Um, but I don't think my sister's on the autism spectrum.
Mm.
She just doesn't. For my sister, it's a vision issue. Her eyesight is weird. One of her eyes is like really weak, and the other one's normal. But because one of them is basically non-functional, she doesn't have depth perception very well, and so her ability to read visual social cues, like in body language, stuff like that, is, if she's looking for it, then it's fine, but it takes a lot of effort for her, so she just doesn't notice things sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is
That's
interesting.
interesting. That's a whole other thing, isn't it? That's one of her senses.
Yeah.
That's kind of been disrupted, so maybe not the same. But so in terms of the show Bones, what is it about that show that you think works? Why does that work? And why do we think Bones has gumption?
I think she has gumption because
I think everyone on that show has gumption.
well, they all stick to what they believe. I mean, my favorite part, you both watched the show all the way through, right?
Mm.
No, I stopped somewhere. She and Booth had their kid. Spoiler alert, they have a kid. But it's been several seasons at least.
Okay, all right. So, but if you saw the kid, then you saw when who was it who was danger, and they all came together to help the person. It was like
The crazy, the crazy serial killer guy, yeah.
Killer guy who was like, because he was undermining everything, like everything they were good at, he undermined it, and yet they all supported each other and just kind of stuck together. Didn't let him pull them apart. And I think that's like sort of like a team gumption, because it's easy to be pulled apart and start to distrust each other, and they didn't do that, especially because they all are so very different.
I think that's one of the strengths as well in the program, is that they are so different, and they've got clearly defined kind of characters and roles. So they're not, and they do kind of have ongoing storylines, that sort of things that are happening in and around. Like, Angela is the fiery girl who's raised by a rock star, and she's really emotive and emotional, and kind of cares about everyone. And then you've got like, what's her husband's name?
What is it? Aurelia. What's her husband? What's Angela's husband's name?
Oh, that guy. I like that guy. He's my favorite.
All right, let's call him the bug guy. I know he's my favorite.
He's the bug guy. He's my favorite. What is his name?
Their little boy's called Michael, and all I can think of is Michael, and I can't remember his name. Anyway, the bug guy. He's really good too. He's kind of like, he's got the certain things that he gets excited about, and he's kind of like
I really like him.
And then you got kind of I think maybe it's that opposites thing too, because those two are really opposite, and Booth and Bones are really opposite. So it's kind of like that whole opposites attracting thing.
Yeah. Well, and I really like how they draw out the relationship development, and their relationships morph over time.
Right.
So it's not like an immediate, we're attracted, but for the sake of the show, we're not going to get together for like 5 seasons. It's actually more complicated than that.
Well, I don't know if you saw this part earlier. You might have stopped. But last season or the season before, maybe it was the beginning of this season, it turned out that Bones, no, it must have been, the end of last season, I guess. Bones found out that Celia
Hodgins
was
that's his name.
Hodgins, yes, thank you. That Booth was gambling again, and she basically kicked him out. And it's like, and it was like so harsh, but so true. A person on the spectrum with that kind of wouldn't be.
She wouldn't. No.
Dealt with that with her dad. She was not gonna deal with it, and because I was really upset about it. I'm like, no, you got to be nicer to him. You got to give him a chance. But it ended up working out, and I don't know what's going to happen with Hodgins. I'm really scared to see what's next for him, but I know you're not keeping up, so I don't want to spoil it for you.
What's happened to him? Oh my gosh, tell me. I must have missed something.
You see the one with the explosion?
No.
Okay.
I think we might be behind
Okay, I
the
don't want to
US.
spoil it, except to say, oh my gosh, it's the biggest cliffhanger I've ever seen. I'm
Is it
really,
end of a season or?
I don't remember if it's the end of the season because you know how they just like take these mid-season breaks and stuff. Um,
Mm,
so I don't know, but it was a big break cliffhanger. So like there's going to be at least a couple of weeks before I know what's going to happen with it. So it was kind
okay.
of good, but yet bad at the same time. And I didn't care
Yeah.
when they like the serial killer stole all his money. I didn't care.
Mm,
I was like, oh, they'll be fine. But this is
yeah. This is something different. All right, don't tell me anymore. Oh my goodness.
I
I'm
won't.
gonna have to. Because he got his money back, didn't he? He was like he invented the thing,
Right.
the material that goes under stuff so that it doesn't break, and they got all the money back, and they were going to move to Paris, and then they changed their minds. Oh my God! The worst thing though about that show is the fact that they killed off Sweets.
Oh, how did
What?
they?
That is really sad.
You knew that. I'm sorry.
No.
I think the actor wanted to go somewhere else, but yes.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense that they would kill him
And
off
they gave him
because
a good
he's
death. They gave him a good heroic death.
so innocent and like naive about so many things, and it's so ironic that he's the psychologist.
Well, I'm pretty sure the writers did that on purpose.
Yeah, I'm sure they did, but it makes sense that they would kill him because that's like he's not one of the critical four.
Oh no, he
So-
is. He was so critical. And then now that new guy. I mean, the new guy is admittedly growing on me, but Sweets was the.
But he's no Sweets.
You what?
I like him, but he's no Sweets. Sweets
I
was
know,
a really
I
big
know.
deal. I think the actor went off to do his own show. I don't think they voluntarily killed him.
No, I don't think they would have either. He was a pretty.
Let's
think he was
find
a
out
pretty integral.
what the actor does.
I think my husband actually Googled it because we wanted to know too. We're like, no, how did they do that?
Why? Why must they kill off?
He's in some movie.
But that's an interesting.
But
But
He's
that's
in
interesting.
Drop Party Massacre 3.
Sweets and Daisy were.
And then he's in like something called Vacation. He's not in anything interesting. He should have stayed,
But that doesn't mean that he didn't intend to be.
Mm.
I suppose.
That's the other interesting part of Bones is the interns that like Daisy and there's always like a really interesting subplot around those like these.
Well, and
So
all
there's
of
the
their
two girls.
interns. That's one of the things I really like about the show Bones in general is that the interns are all sort of side characters, but they're all fascinating and they're all like interesting characters. None of them are cardboard cutouts.
Mm.
And a lot of times in shows where you have a character that's on maybe once or twice, they do end up being shallow.
Right, even the interns the only thing that puzzles me is why the interns keep rotating through. That does puzzle me, but I like it. I'm not complaining about it. But they have their own arcs. I mean, like Daisy had an arc, and I forget his name, the guy who was like sort of a hick and dated Dan's daughter for a while, and then ended up with cancer. I mean, he had like a huge arc.
And then there's the one that's ended up dating the head lady.
Yeah.
And then he goes back to Iran and all the rest of that. You know, there's kind of.
Well, that was kind of interesting. They definitely are not afraid to be somewhat political.
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't want a show that's too political. I don't want to be. They kind of walk a good line. I think they don't.
Yeah, I mean, they're not afraid to deal with it if they need to deal with it, but they don't it's not like in your face every single show.
Yeah. So so in terms of Bones, what's your favorite thing about her? Either of you?
I'm trying to think because I do have one bone to pick with Bones, which is I read the original novels that this is based on, and this is like they took like one little idea and completely changed it And I kind of don't like that because the books are really, really good the way they are, but they're a lot darker. So in some ways I kind of give them a tip of my hat that they made this a good TV show without...
For general audiences.
Yeah, for a general audience. And they probably introduced a general audience to the idea of archaeology and facial reconstruction and all the other things that the book did. But they took out some of the good stuff. Like in the book, the character had a daughter, and the daughter died, or daughter disappeared, and she didn't know what happened to her. So that's part of her journey, is trying to figure out what happened to the daughter. And that's one of the driving motivations she has, to always be looking at the bones, because she's trying to reunite the people the bones belong to with the families who are missing them. So
well, that's a good piece of backstory.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the TV show doesn't get that, but, you know, they did it on purpose, and they did it with the author's permission. So, you know, you can't really complain. But sometimes I think, you know, anyone who picked up the books would be like, what? This is not right.
Was she called Bones in the books? Like, what was her name in the books?
She was called Tempe in the books.
Tempe, yeah, okay. Because that's a similar storyline to, what is it, the Eve Duncan books. Is that Nora Roberts? Is that who does those?
Yeah,
I
think that the Eve Duncan books came second, because these books have been around for quite a while.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's funny, though. I have no inclination to read the books. I haven't read them, and I probably wouldn't, especially now that you've said that they're a lot darker and there's that whole storyline running beneath it, because I don't like reading about dead children. It just don't like it.
It is weird.
Whereas the show, I watch kind of shows like that, and my husband kind of makes fun of me for it, because I kind of watch like NCIS, and I watch Bones, and I watch, I mean, Castle's not quite as, you know, but like Bones,
but no, I'm exactly the same way though. Like I will watch the murder mystery shows, but I don't read mysteries, and I don't read thrillers, and I don't read horror.
It's an interesting, because I think all, like the three shows I just mentioned, they've all got a line of comedy in them. Like, even if it's like NCIS is probably, you know, they're kind of light-hearted characters, and they're quite, and it's not really as comedic as, say, Castle, but it still is quite light compared to, you know, something really gritty like SVU or, I don't know, other ones. So I can handle those kind of...
But I can handle the darker things if they're in movie or TV format. Like, I don't have a problem watching Criminal Minds.
Can't do that one. That's a little too dark for me.
That's the darkest one I think of. But like, I don't have an issue with it. Whereas reading that kind of stuff is worse. And I think it's because I'm very visual and I have a very vivid imagination. So when I'm reading the words on the page, in my imagination, it's like the worst possible version of what's been described on the page.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. Yeah.
Whereas when it's a movie or a TV show, it's exactly as bad as it looks. Like, it's not worse than it looks.
It's passive. Like, what? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
You have the disconnect of knowing it's an actor, so it takes a little of the stress away. When I'm reading a book, those characters are so real to me. If they die on the page, it's like they've died in real life.
Yeah, and I think watching TV and movies is passive. I think you sit back and you allow the TV to, or whatever, to give you the imagery and to do it, and you just kind of go, oh yeah. Whereas reading a book, you have to actually, you read the words and you translate it in your head into images. At least I do, and I'm thinking you guys do too. And so that becomes a lot more, it's in your head, and you, as you say, you kind of visualize it much worse than anything that they could come across. Although I always think that that's the worst movies that you see, the ones that work the best, that are like the horror ones that are the most horrific, are the ones where they don't actually show you anything. Like, you know, the one Psycho where he stabs her in the shower, and you don't actually see him stabbed. It's just blood spatters, knife, and that is her. You know, like stuff like that. Or what's another good one? The Saw movies. I've never seen them, but I'm pretty sure that they don't actually specifically show an awful lot of the.
I don't know. I
could be
haven't seen
wrong.
them.
I don't know,
No.
but I know that the commercials for the Chucky doll movies scare me just watching the commercials.
There's something about dolls and their expressionlessness that is very terrifying. Speaking of dolls, in Bones, when Booth is like terrified of the clowns and like shoots at the ice cream truck that has the clown on the top,
That's funny.
it's hilarious. But like, I completely understand why you would do that. That makes total sense because that particular clown is really creepy.
Yeah.
I don't get the clown thing.
No, it's like the dolls in the horror movies.
Mm.
Yeah, it just creeped him out. He just
they're so, yeah.
I saw this is completely random, right? But I saw I was looking at an open home, so a house that's being sold, and that you put the open home pictures up online. So before you go and see it, I assume that you do the same thing in the States. And one of the rooms was a bedroom, and they had a doll like that sitting on the bed, and it was like this creepy doll, and it's like, just for that doll, I will not go in that house. Just for the creepy doll lying on the bed. It was awful. One of those real porcelain-y.
Agent for advice on
Porcelain dolls with the eyes that like have the eyelids that move.
Yeah.
It's those dolls. Those are the dolls that are the scariest.
Yeah. Anyway.
Especially when they're in horror movies.
Yeah. You know it's going to do something terrible.
If you see a doll in a horror movie, you know that it's going to be super creepy.
It's like the like the Chekhov's statement about the shotgun or the rifle over the mantle. If it's hanging there in the first scene, it has to be shot. The same thing is true with dolls. If the doll
it's like but it's like in Bones and all of the other crime shows, at the very beginning they'll show a clip of some random person like doing something normal, like going to the grocery store or going on a run, and you know that person is the person who's gonna die.
Although the best one of those is when they twist it, and that person isn't the one that's going to die, and it's something else, or they're the one who kills someone. Because occasionally they do twist it.
Twist it sometimes, which I like.
Yeah.
That's true. I do like them to keep me guessing. But yeah, it's usually enough to just feel sad that person's gonna go. Yeah. And they never let you. I mean, you're always like, I wonder. But although sometimes they do show you who kills the person, don't they?
Mm.
How do they do it?
It depends. Sometimes it depends. I think
I'm
on whether the victim is more important to that episode or the killer is more important to that episode.
Oh, that's
in Bones they don't generally. They would, because the whole point of Bones is them searching for the killer. So if they know who it is, except for the guy that was a serial killer, where they kind of knew it was him and they were just trying to find a way to prove it. Right. Actually, they've had a couple of those where they know a person did it, or they think that a person did it, and they work backwards to try and find the proof. Although that seems flawed to do it that way, because then you're just kind of looking for stuff that maybe you should just be more open-minded.
The way they start, though. I mean, they have their in at the dead body, so that's kind of how they have to go, and that might be the beginning of the story, or it might be the middle of the story, it might be the end of the story. You never know. And I do like that. I like that they're really careful that the story does revolve around the body they find, so that you know more about the bones on the table than you would have thought you would know by the end of the episode. And get that. It's not just a body.
I guess that's part of why I enjoy it personally, is because there's always that mystery element, and you're trying to. It's almost like you know that you've been given the clues, and you know that it's kind of, but you want to feel like you're figuring out who did it before they do. You want to feel smart. Yeah.
Do you usually do that?
I often do, yeah. But it's just a guess. It's just like, they seem guilty. It would make sense in a story sense for them to have done it. So it's not generally because I.
So I will tell my husband, as soon as I think I know, I'll be there. I know what happened. It's this, and that's how they did it. But I'm not spoiling it for him because we don't really know if I'm right. And so if I'm wrong, then he gets to say, you were wrong. Like, okay, I guess you were right.
So how often are you right?
For me.
How often are you right?
A lot. I mean, I'm a writer. I know how writers think. And so I'm
Yeah.
really more about the writer than the criminal. I don't think I know how criminal. I think I'd make a terrible crime solver, but for crime novel solver, I'm good.
Yeah. I'm the same. I think there's a way of thinking or a way of plotting that you kind of know that if they, for example, put the doll in the beginning of the thing and it's prominently shown, then maybe the doll is going to have some important point later on in the story, and it's stuff like that that's not, as you say, as a crime solver, you're not going to necessarily have those clues, but as a viewer, you've been given information. Yeah,
Right, and then
it's kind of interesting.
you don't get all the stuff that real from CSI people do, where it's like the gum wrappers and the what's important, what's not important. They have a lot more to sift through. We just have the clues and the few red herrings that the writers threw us. So it's a lot easier for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of fun to try and guess, but it's also, I mean, do you ever go, well, I would have done it this way, or are you just whatever story they go with, you are like fine with it?
I'm fine with it. I don't think about it in that way.
Yeah, because I'm not logical enough to have figured out how it's done, like how it's written, how they decide how they're gonna have the characters make their false guesses on the way to being right. And I don't really care. I like just experiencing the story as it's presented to me. So, like, my mom will sit and watch and be like, oh, well, it's this person, it's this person, it's this person. And I'm not really trying that actively to figure it out in the same way.
I'm curious what the writers are doing with it.
Yeah.
My husband will sit there and go, oh, that's not realistic. What does he do? They wouldn't have that. They wouldn't be able to do that. And there's that element of it too, where I'm like, I'm fine with that because this is just a story, and I'm just enjoying the ebb and flow of the story, and I'm happy for that. It is quite a passive thing for me. I'm not as critical of certain storylines as he is. He wants something to be more real, or more. He likes watching documentaries more than I do.
Documentaries, but yeah, even the documentaries aren't always, because they might take a real fact and then twist it beyond all recognition to say
a version of the truth, or their version of. Yeah.
But no, I think Bones actually holds up. And I mean, of course, people aren't that perfect. They don't get along that well. They would have been more infighting and stuff. And they do only give a very small nod to the idea that they have a budget. They can't just do everything. And they always do one case at a time, which I think is unusual. But all TV shows seem to do that. All TV cop and detective shows, they only have to solve one crime. It's not at all realistic. But I wonder if it sometimes feels that way when you're doing the job, that there's the one job that's paramount to you and you kind of take care of the other stuff. It's like, like when we're writing a book, that book is really front and center for us. So we might be, making dinner or doing our spreadsheets or whatever, but we still feel like it's the book that's driving us. Maybe that's what they're trying to capture.
I guess they can't do everything. You can't incorporate everything into it, like in a book. In the same way that you can't put every single little minutiae of a person's life in, you have to be selective.
Yeah, like when I was on the plane last week, I watched The Martian, and I had listened to the audiobook of The Martian. I really loved it because I love science fiction, but it's very detailed. I mean, he goes through, okay, I'm on Mars, what are the supplies I have, how can I feed myself, and how long can I feed myself and stay alive? And he does the calculations, and he itemizes what he has, and he goes through and he does things. And it's really fascinating, and you get a sense for how long it takes. And then I watched, the movie, and it's like, even though they tried to get that feeling, they couldn't really. Like they had Matt Damon grow a beard. Well, I'm sorry, growing a long beard does not indicate, that level of despair to me.
Mm.
And I think books do have it all over movies sometimes. Really
Yeah.
experiencing what it's like.
Well, that's generally it, isn't it? Like, you always kind of you can go inside the person's head in a book. You can say things that they were thinking. I watched a movie called Brooklyn, which is I can't remember the name of the author that wrote it, but it's essentially a book first, and it's about a young Irish girl who immigrates to America in the 1950s, and kind of basically she's really homesick, and then eventually something happens and she has to go back to Ireland, and it's kind of this kind of, she's torn between maybe staying in Ireland or going back to Brooklyn in the end. It's sort of this whole thing, and I think, having watched the film, and I cried a couple of times, like I was obviously caught up in it, but I think the book would have been better because you would have had a stronger sense of what was going on in her head.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't. You don't always get that in a movie because it's just the things that they can talk about, the things you can bring up in a conversation. You don't get the arguments to and forth that maybe a person would have with himself over something that maybe you could kind of incorporate into a book. I don't know. So maybe we could say that the books about Bones are better than the TV show. I don't know.
I think they're just too different. I don't even think you can compare them.
Mm.
And that's almost probably better. I wonder if that's why they did that. Because Game of Thrones, for example, which I haven't watched but I have read, I hear so many people who are like, oh no, what's going to happen because now the TV show is caught up with the books. And, a lot of what happened in the books actually did happen in the TV show. And so now...
But he's a slower writer than the movie show writers, the TV show writers.
They made him tell the TV show writers, made him tell them what was going to happen. Like, he had to go through and give them the ending of Game of Thrones before they would agree to produce it because they didn't want to end up in a position where they didn't know. Yeah.
But they won't tell us.
No, they don't tell. I mean, they've done things in the series, the TV series of Game of Thrones, that weren't in the books. Like the burning of that guy's little 12-year-old daughter was not in the books.
Right.
And that was the most. I can't unsee that, and I really wish I could because that was. I finished watching that episode and felt like I'd been through the ringer. That was the most awful thing I've ever seen.
That's why I can't watch them because that level of violence actually played out. I can't watch that. It's hard enough in the books, but I can kind of pull myself back from it a little bit, or read it really fast, and try not to think about it too much. But I can't do that in the movie.
Well, I wish I did. I kept sitting there while that was happening, waiting for someone to save her. That was why I watched it, because I didn't really believe that they would actually have her dying, like that would actually happen, and then it did, and I was just like, I can't. I wish I hadn't seen it. I don't. That was horrific, and that made me. I didn't watch the next few episodes. I couldn't. I just was too traumatized. But anyway.
Have you read the books?
No.
Oh, okay.
Read the book.
I tried to read the books, but he's too verbose for me.
Oh.
Just like Dickens.
I could read his world forever, except I would have to save and rescue most of the people. That's
yeah.
You happy killing people.
That would be an interesting spin-off series.
Yeah.
All the people all of the people. What happens to characters when they die? Do they actually die, or do they go on to live in, like, what if when they die in the novel they come into real life?
Well, like in fantasy.
If Jon Snow is really dead, I am going to be so annoyed.
Yes, agreed.
He's my favorite character. I just can't even understand what they'll do without Jon Snow. Like, it just doesn't even seem like that can even, like, what?
Well, here's the thing. It's like, so if one of the characters that we meet at the very beginning of the sagas does not survive to sort of lead the way to the next hopeful generation, he will have broken a promise, an implicit promise
Yeah.
all authors give you.
Right.
So, is it going to be Jon Snow? Is it going to be Arya? I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Because there's the assumption that it's Jon Snow because it's like he's the secret, like he's not really Edward Stark's son, bastard son. He's the son of the king and Edward's sister. I mean, there's that, and you're kind of thinking, well, then he would be the perfect one to end up on the swordy throne business. But now, if he's dead, then that's what? It makes no sense to me. It makes sense in terms of real life because real life doesn't happen like a story, but in terms of, as you say, a promise to the reader.
According to IMDb, Kit Harington was only in Game of Thrones through 2015.
No, it's a secret because they're not gonna tell us.
In the books, and he hasn't come back yet, but we don't know what happened to him. So
yeah,
and they would keep it that way until the episode that he comes back.
Yeah, because otherwise that would give it away.
Because everyone is waiting. That's one of the reasons why we're all so mad at George R.R. Martin. That's like,
I remember when I was in high school, my friends were reading Game of Thrones, and they kept trying to get me to read it, but I had been so burned by the Wheel of Time series and how it just never ended, and it was like the same book over and over, and it never ended, that I was like, this is the same, it's exactly the same story. I'm not going to read it until I know the series is finished. And then when the TV show came out, I tried to read it, and I just could not get into it. Even with all my friends telling me how awesome it was, I was like, this is really slow and really boring.
And sometimes that's just
I didn't even get to the end of chapter 1. Like, I can read fast, but it wasn't happening. So.
Well, part of that might be that a lot of these people that you're reading about are going to be dead shortly, and it's really hard to invest in people are going to die.
It's also that he is on purpose not taking sides and not letting you take sides.
And see, I like that about the books.
Well, I like political ambiguity for the characters. But as a reader, I want that special knowledge of knowing who the real bad guy is or who the real good guy is. And they don't have to be perfect, and they don't have to be always good, and they can do bad things, and the bad can do good things, and that's fine. But I want to know when I start a book who I need to be invested in. And he did that on purpose to make that not happen. And I don't like it.
Yeah, and you knew it going in. I mean, I didn't know it going in. I was probably 2 books in before I realized he was planning on killing off everybody I liked in truly horrible ways. And then
it took me a while to get into the TV show also. I mean, it was easier to do it because I could catch up on episodes while I was doing my homework. I didn't have to, like, reading, I can't do my homework and read at the same time. But I can do my homework and watch TV at the same time. So it was easier to watch the first season, but I didn't really get into it until the second season. Like, it took that long to really capture my interest. It takes that long until you realize, okay, there are maybe 4 characters who are in it for the long run.
Yeah, there aren't very many, and it takes a while to figure out who those are.
Yeah.
Well, one of the ones I thought was in it for the long haul's dead now, apparently. So, even the ones you think are in it for the long haul might not be.
Can't trust him.
Can't trust George R.R. Martin.
Nope. And it's interesting, too, because, like, I have stories where I have characters that I'm planning on killing off, but I don't really like most of them, so it's not a problem for me.
That was one of the things. It was like when when Bones kicked Booth out for the gambling, I think if they had not reconciled, if they had stayed separated for much longer, I might have stopped watching the show, because even though that's realistic for real life, I wouldn't have liked it for the show. It would have made me mad.
Yeah.
It was really hard to get together.
Yeah.
Well,
and Bones, even in the first season, at the end of the first season, the intern is the serial killer in that first season.
Yeah, that one that they all loved. The really young, interesting one.
Well, and so that they did that really well. Like, I didn't see that coming.
No.
It wasn't the first season. That was a few seasons.
Did it take 2 seasons?
Yeah.
I don't remember. It's been so long. But like they did a good job of making you really like that intern, and then suddenly you find out that he's horribly twisted and messed up.
He was kind of a little bit like that whole socially awkward and able to. He sort of
right, but he was socially awkward in a kind of adorable way.
Well, one of the things they explored. I mean, I don't know if you saw the next season, but they explored what it was about him. I mean, because once he realized, once he kind of got away from the brainwashing and realized what he'd really done, he was actually sorry. But so they kind of were trying to figure out how it was that he got so caught up in that. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But, so they talked a little bit about gullible people, which I guess is the opposite of people with gumption.
I think you can have gumption and be gullible at the same time. It's just a recipe for a disaster, because then then you're all gung ho about doing something that might be a really bad idea.
I guess that's probably true. Yeah. I'm not saying that people with gumption can't have gumption to do bad things, but I'm not sure that you can be gullible and have gumption, because I think one of the things about gumption is that you kind of have a vision and see where you're going. It's not just that you stick to it blindly. It's that you actually really think it's the best thing.
Right, but you can have a vision and see where you're going, and that vision can be based off of false beliefs that someone who's trying to manipulate you has told you, leaving out critical information.
But really gullible people almost don't seem to be able to have strong beliefs. They seem to believe whoever has strong beliefs, that's the closest to them at the time. But, it's possible to be naive and have gumption, definitely. Because my family laughs at me, calls me gullible, because they can tell me a lot of things, and I'll be like, really? Is that true? And they'll think, do you really believe that to be true? I don't know. I was thinking how it could be, that there are people living in the middle of the earth. Maybe that's possible.
Yeah, I get told
gullible.
That's
where all of the salamanders have disappeared there, where it's all fiery
Stop
and
it.
on their element.
Stop it. She'll believe you, and then you'll be in trouble. You'll be perpetuating myths.
Or originating them. More fun to originate myths than perpetuate them.
That's actually a really good idea. I had a good idea. Salamanders and dwarves hiding deep, deep below.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
There you go. The next story, you heard it here.
It's probably going to show up in Tatterhood at some point.
Well, that would be interesting.
So have we got anything more to talk about Bones? Do we want to... just trying to think.
So who... Okay, if you have to pick anyone in all of the whole show, of all of the seasons you've seen, to be your favorite character in all of Bones, who is it?
Sweets.
Can I pick a pair? I like Booth and Bones. That's why I watch it, because it's the interaction between the two of them. They're so opposite, and so they make each other work better too. He makes her better and she makes him better, and I like that about it.
Yes.
And I was worried when they did actually get together that it would ruin the show, but I think they've managed to make it work. You know how when you're watching a show and there's all this sexual tension and there's kind of like almost misses, and that's the great part of it as well. Like that's where you like watching these two characters kind of evolving in this kind of almost relationship, and then they get together and then it ruins it all. But
it's not a
Yeah.
sexual tension that is between. I mean, they have a healthy relationship, but the tension between them is the science versus the faith issue, sort of, and so that keeps that tension alive because
Yeah.
part, it hasn't so far, but
Yeah.
raising children, and they bring that in every so often.
Yeah. Hodgins is my favorite.
Yeah, I like him,
Yeah.
I have to say. The other thing I was going to say, because you were saying, Kelly, about them breaking up because of the gambling, and I actually really thought that added to it as well, that she didn't just go, oh, well, we'll work on it. She actually said, no, that's not acceptable. You brought this person. It's almost like you kind of say that it's something to do with her being on the autism spectrum, but I almost think, no, that's someone reacting to something, and he brought danger into it's her defending her child almost as well as
Well,
him.
and it shows, I think, her self-confidence when she knows, like, if she thinks she's right, then she's right, and there's no compromise.
Right, so that's the definition of an autistic person.
So, like, I think a lot of people in that who might end up in that situation of having someone they're in a relationship with do something they don't want them to do would be like, oh, well, it's just once, I'll forgive you this once. And they aren't willing to stand up for what they believe is right or wrong and say no or yes in that very
make a difference. Well, I mean,
they're too willing to live in the gray area of the in between instead of picking either yes, this is okay, or no, this is not okay. But like that's too strong for most people.
It's because a criminal that Booth owes money to comes to the house and makes a veiled threat. So it's not like she's just imagining there could be a threat. She knows if he's doing this, this is the kind of thing that's going to come into her family's life, and there's no way she's willing to put up with that. So, I mean, to be fair to her, she has a really strong reason to do it, and it did seem very authentic. But
she's also willing to be strong about that kind of judgment in other circumstances. That's part of who she is, and that's developed very early into the show.
Yes.
But life isn't black and white like that. I think that's part of her thing, is that she sees everything black and white. But life isn't generally black and white, and so there's this kind of real, like, I mean, how many people would necessarily just, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I'm just thinking, if you've got someone coming to your door and threatening you, you probably would have serious words with your partner, but would you necessarily, I don't know, kick them out and say that's it?
She doesn't have any doubt in herself, which is really interesting, and, especially because she's a woman without doubt. That is a very unusual thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a good thing for it to exist and for it to be out there, because I think a lot of women especially tend to be more self-doubting than most men, or at least they appear to be. And so I think it's good to have a female role model out there who is very self-confident, even if she's not always right.
And she's self-confident in her intelligence. I mean, that's one of the funniest things is when she has her interns and she's, sharp with them because they're not quite as brilliant as she is. It doesn't matter where they have their degrees or what they've done. She's very matter of fact about it. I am the best, and it's just so funny because who says that?
Little kids. That's who say it. It's really. It's like you'll say to Zoe, my daughter Zoe, "Oh, your hair looks pretty today," and she goes, "I know, I do, I know," and that's almost what she's like. They're like, "Oh wow, that's really smart that you got that." I know, of course it is. I'm smart,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I really love what you said there, Kelly. A woman without doubt. That's almost a tagline. Like, it's just such a, it's, yeah. I think that's amazing. I think that's a good way to put it
She's
for
not
her.
what you think of on TV. Is there
She what? Sorry.
Is there any other character on TV, any other woman character on TV who is as strong and self-assured as she is?
I think Laura from The Mysteries of Laura. But she's a very different personality type. You should. You would love it. She's a cop.
You will like it.
And she's a redhead, and she's got the redheaded personality, and she's the best cop. She's the best detective, and she's very organized about solving her cases, but she's completely disorganized about everything else. And she has 2 little boys, and her ex-husband becomes the police chief in her precinct.
She has to work for her ex.
She has to work for her ex, and there's unresolved emotions, and it's awesome. It's so good. It's on Netflix. You should go watch it. It's so good. It's got that comedic element that.
But she does doubt herself more than Bones, I would say. She, you know, she goes with her.
She doesn't doubt herself at all. She knows she's a flake as a mother, and she knows she's the best as a detective.
You know, she doesn't know she's the best as a detective. What she knows is that when her instincts are telling her that there's more to the story, that she needs to find that out, even if it means, flouting her orders or, sort of going around a direction.
No, I think she knows. She's very confident about everything. She's confident about her flaws. She's confident about the fact that she can't get her boys to clean up after themselves.
She doesn't actually think she has any flaws. She thinks
She's
that other people have flaws, and so she's letting her friends help her talk to other people so she doesn't, trigger their flawed behavior in response to her simple statement that she's the best.
So does she really think she's the best, like that, like in that way?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I might have to watch. Because my impression of her, I kind of had seen some shorts of it. It must have been on one of the channels here. I'm not sure. And my impression wasn't of that. It was of someone who kind of was fairly flaky and was running around. And I think maybe I was getting.
Yeah, that's Laura, but she was talking about Bones and how Bones.
Oh, you were talking about Bones.
Being really confident, but I do think that Laura is confident in her ability as a detective. She never second guesses. Well, actually, she did in a recent episode that I watched where she thought somebody was innocent. And some evidence came up, and she's like, well, the person has to be guilty. But I will say, spoiler alert, maybe she wasn't wrong.
Mm-hmm. So maybe she was right.
So it's her, but that's what I like, because for Bones, she's like a total science person. Science, facts, data.
Right, but Bones is not always right either.
Laura is an instinct person. So in some ways they're...
Right, so their personalities are very different, but they both have that self-confidence.
Right, they're 2 strong, self-confident women. And it is interesting to watch them.
The only times Bones is wrong, though, is when the evidence is wrong. Whenever they make a point of that, in terms of solving a case, if Bones was wrong, there was one a while ago where there was some guy that was in prison or something, and he was about to be, he was on death row, maybe, I think was the rush, and they realized that she'd made some mistake, and it was something to do with some part of the science. It wasn't her, because she'd interpreted what she'd, they make quite a strong case of her.
Yes, that you're right. They do try to make sure, because she's not, I think maybe once or twice she's actually been wrong, and it throws her. She doesn't like it, but you're right. Mm-hmm. Then she digs down to figure out why she was wrong, and then she finds out what the real answer is. That's true. And it is always about the evidence.
Because I don't think I'd
a conclusion.
I don't necessarily think when I think about a person without doubt, there's kind of like a it's almost like I don't trust it because there's like in her it's okay because she is so smart and she's quite methodical about going through every little piece of evidence to try and come up with the correct solution, and that's kind of okay. But you sort of think a person without doubt is kind of an arrogant person who maybe isn't willing to listen to, you know, like with Bones, at least, you know, if you can prove to her using evidence that something is not what she thought it was, then she is willing to change her mind on that.
Yes.
And
well,
she would
that's
do
why
that.
Angela and Hodgins are so critical to that show working, to the relationship. Like the four critical characters on that show are Hodgins, Angela, Bones, and Booth. Because Booth is the reason why they can work on criminal cases. Bones is the smartest who knows how to put all the pieces together and how to extract from the tiniest little detail what the answer is. And Hodgins sort of balances the science and the people skills. He's like good at both. And Angela is the person.
The emotional.
Who balances Bones' inability to notice when she's saying something in a way that's going to cause someone else to not be able to do their job because they're emotionally like distressed.
I did really like, though, the conversations Bones and Sweets would have about psychology.
Yeah, I used to love that.
Like the voodoo science.
She would just basically like mock and diss his entire career, and he's like a child genius in his area, but she's just like, you know, that doesn't make any. Yeah,
that's not logical.
That's not logical. I love the fact that they were his was it his thesis or something? He did some major project on Bones and Booth and how they worked together and stuff, and that was always really cute. Like the kind of things that would come up based on, like, people go, oh yes, I read Sweets' report and he said that this and that, and it's like, what? What?
Yeah, every so often they would remind you that was what his job was. Yeah, and it made it understandable why it took longer for them to take him seriously or to trust him, because he was kind of like their snitch.
Yeah. And he looked so young. That was always the funny thing.
Yeah.
He still looks young. I know.
Yeah. Anyway, so, have we exhausted our time?
I think we have, and I think we are doing fairy tale battles next week.
Okay.
Goodness me. What does that mean?
Disney versus originals.
Ooh.
Okay.
So Grimm and Anderson and all of the others whose names I don't even remember, because most fairy tales are actually just stories that people told in villages and don't have actual authors. So the original dark, gritty ones, or the Disney ones.
The original thing.
Which ones win?
Because people retold them however they wanted to retell them.
Yeah.
So they're the original fan fiction. I never thought.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Somebody likes to retell the story the way they want to. Like if I retell any of George R. R. Martin's, everybody else, almost everybody's coming back to life. There are a few people I will let stay dead.
Like Joffrey. Surely, please tell me Joffrey stays dead.
Is he the only kid that you don't get upset about that he's dead?
Yeah, pretty much. Don't care that he's dead. All the other children.
Think of him as a kid. It's too hard to think of him as a kid because he's so incarnate evil.
I think he's is it a sociopath or a psychopath? Whichever one is the one that doesn't feel emotion.
I don't know. Do either of them feel emotion?
One of them does and one of them doesn't. I don't remember.
I think it's a sociopath who doesn't feel emotion, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I would hate to say a definition. I am not a woman without doubt. I am a woman full of doubts. So therefore, I am going to say I don't know.
Well, we will have battles of which versions of fairy tales are the best ones next week. I'm excited about that one. I don't know what
Yes.
is going to win. Actually, I
I
know
have a
what
feeling
wins
I
for
know.
me.
I was going to say, I have a feeling I know which one you want to win.
I know which one I want to win, but that doesn't mean that it's going to win.
Who
Right?
judges what wins? This is the question I have.
Oh,
Jeez.
that's a good question.
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
But,
Maybe I'll just be the judge.
oh,
I think it's gotta be a vote. So each of us has to decide which we want to win, and then we'll talk about it, and then at the end we'll say which each of us wants to win, and whichever one has 2 of 3 or 3 of 3 wins.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
Right?
All right.
All right. We'll be
You'll
back
meet me.
next week.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.